So Andy, tell me about Power Saving Solutions, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, we are um, a manufacturer of what we call hush pods battery energy storage solutions. So big banks of batteries, um, converting DC battery power into AC energy. So we predominantly operate on sites that have temporary power or need temporary power. They don't have a grid connection yet. It's not always the way, but 99% of the time it is for us. We've just gone into our 12th year. Been here in Meaden Vale 3 years now. I have no idea where the time's gone. Yeah, so we manufacture battery storage solutions for a hire and for sale to uh, businesses around the country.
I know energy storage, it's a competitive sector. What what got you started in it?
Yeah, well, it's competitive now. I mean, when we started, it absolutely wasn't competitive. Barely anybody had heard of it. Um, that's not to say that they hadn't, but you know, lots of people thought I'd say to people a lot of the time, lots of people think we kind of landed from Mars really with this ridiculous notion of how to power temporary sites. So what got me started in it, I met a guy that had built a prototype of a unit in a lockup in Mansfield, where all the best ideas come from. A guy called Andy Perry, and I had another business. To be honest, around the country facilities company, predominantly commercial cleaning. To be honest, yeah, which was doing quite well around the country, but based in Mansfield. I met Andy, and he asked me to get involved in it, commercialise really what he'd produced. And I went to look at it in this lockup. I'll be honest, I had zero experience with batteries,
Right.
no electrical background whatsoever.
Yeah.
I thought it landed from Mars. So I looked at it and kind of scratched my head and thought, well, I don't really know what it is. But when he explained what it did, its place in terms of what he was looking at, I just thought this is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I, it's just one of those opportunities. One of those opportunities that I never thought I would have, because people kind of get, you do a job and then you kind of stereotypically you just follow that track forever, don't you? Until somebody says you can move higher. So I'd done all that, and anyway, it was one of these opportunities. I met Andy, and I said, "Yeah, let's get involved." And I sold my business very, very quickly, and we started Power Saving Solutions.
So you had someone with a very technical engineering background, and then you were the business head who turned into.
Yes, essentially, yeah, that is how it operated. But I was heavily dependent upon Andy, certainly for the first few years. I mean, he had all the technical expertise, and we were approaching businesses that I'd never had any experience of. So I was literally, learning the job on the hoof, which was absolutely fine. I mean, it's not. It's a complicated thing that we put together, but we're essentially we're solving a problem. We're providing power, which everybody needs, to a site in a particular format.
Yeah.
So that's not hard to get your head around, although sometimes it is actually in terms of it's not difficult for us, and that's one of the issues we have. I'll probably circle back round to it. I will. But in terms of the premise for it all, I kind of, I learned on the hoof, as I was saying before, and it came together. So I'd built a business already, so I got experience of that, even though we weren't selling something I was familiar with, we were still selling something. So it could have been anything. I would have had an idea about how we would have taken it to market and kind of make it work. But yeah, Andy was enormously influential, certainly in the first few years.
So you had a sector that's became a lot more competitive. What would you say differentiates you guys from everyone else?
Well, the reason that it's become competitive is because we've survived. Made no bones about that. When we first started, we had two other competitors. One was a company called Firefly, who built for sale built lead acid based push pods, and they used to call their range Cygnus. It was a bit odd. Although when we first started, we used to call ours hybrid power pods. So, and then we changed the name. But Firefly were around, and for a few years, even after they'd gone belly up, people used to ask us for a Firefly unit, which used to irk me a little bit. But what they were very good at was advertising the product.
Right.
Really, really good at getting to the market that we were serving and telling people about what it was supposed to do. What I don't think they ever had was a product that was nearly as good as ours, but in terms of marketing, they were 1,000 times better than we were. There was also another company called Off Grid Energy, which have in recent years, been sold to Pramac, who've taken over the manufacturing arm, and they, I think, were influenced heavily by our business model. They started another company called Hybrid Power Hire, and they sold those to Sunbelt. But that was an entirely lead-based model as well. We had some issues with that particular type of model in our early years. Lead was really difficult to control. Really cheap, but really difficult to control. So we had a lot of conversations early doors about how we were finding how difficult we were finding lead, and Andy said to me one day, I think we should move to lithium. There are a lot of benefits to using lithium over lead. It's significantly lighter. It was a 48-volt unit, so it meant that we didn't have to have a string of batteries. So you could literally put one in, and then if anything went wrong with it, you just replace it. Whereas with lead, used to be, I try not to get too technically, but there were 6-volt batteries. So if one of them went wrong, to form a 48-volt string, you have to have 8 of them. So if one of them went wrong, then you invariably you had to change all 8 on the string. So that was problematic. If you got an issue on site, then you'd have to change it out. But the biggest problem was just controlling heat within the batteries. They would struggle to release gases that they produced. So they'd overheat, they'd ripple, sometimes they would melt. If you're serving the building industry or any industry, the last thing anybody wants is a product that melts. So we were really struggling. I mean, we've had a number of times during our history where we have really struggled for cash.
Yeah.
These things aren't cheap. And like I said at the outset, people thought we'd landed from Mars. So buying the product we found next to impossible.
Right.
So it wasn't a lot cheaper than we currently produce it for now, because we do so much now. We obviously can sell it at a far better price, because we just get the benefit of volume. But then when we're only building 1 or 2, it was just staggeringly expensive to build. We'd not got the product right. So things were going wrong with it. So selling it was just a nightmare. So what we did differently, and what we still do differently to the vast majority of businesses out there now, is that we manufacture a product that is for both sale and hire. Ordinarily, it's for sale if you're manufacturing.
Right.
So, but Andy had a discussion with me about changing to lithium because of the problems we had with lead. And I genuinely, I could have thrown him through the window, because we were struggling, and lithium was even more expensive than lead. But anyway, we went for it. We built 17 of them. We got a customer who've continued to be brilliant to us right up to today, in Murphy, who allowed us to put out pods for hire, because you could convince them to spend 300 quid a week.
Yeah.
Convince them to spend £30,000. Different proposition. So so we built those. We built 17, and we've grown from there, really. So, but it all came with a lot of challenges. I was borrowing money at 26% APR.
Yeah.
You know, all those things that you get when you're just starting out a new business and there's only 2 of you and a dog. And, I've actually and then John came along, who still works for us now, John Milner. So 3 of us and a dog. Yeah, nobody had, you know, it took a long time to convince people that we were for real. I find in business that, certainly in your infancy, lots of businesses look to see if you're gonna fall over or not anyway, before they have any confidence in you. And still up to today, you know, there's a reason why they ask you what you've done in your previous year and the previous 3 years. They wanna know that you're a safe business, so and we were anything but that. So why and how we convinced Murphy to take us on as a, you know, as a supplier, you know, just a miracle, but we managed it. So, and then, yeah, we've grown the business on the back of that.
Amazing. I'm a firm believer that, especially when it comes to marketing, someone said to me early on at the outset of my business that there's riches and niches,
Yeah.
and all trying to, you know, dominate a niche. Is there kind of a specific niche that you guys work in that you particularly service?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've our niche has always been around the building industry, really, and then serving plant hire companies, so who predominantly serve the building industry. So we've you know, it served us really well. But I guess anybody looking at the business at the moment will look at us and think, "Oh, well, success. You know, you've done great." But I look at it and I'm just enormously frustrated, just massively frustrated. I don't feel like we've been a success. I think we've only scratched the surface of what we're capable of. We've not convinced, even in the market, the niche that we're providing, we've not convinced them as a whole that battery storage is the way forward yet. That, you know, you should absolutely be using it on your sites if you're using anything up to 100 kVA set. We've, on the due diligence that we've just had completed with the deal, it said that we were serving about 15% of the potential to, you know, of the kind of building off-grid market. That's not just us, that's us and anybody else who's providing you with battery storage at this moment in time.
So the whole sector is only 15% of what's possible.
Yeah, so I know we're going to talk about, you know, what could you move into, you know, what is it you could serve, but really, we've got so far to go with just the niche that we're serving. And when we say niche here, I mean the building industry in the UK is far from a niche. Yeah, you know, sector. It's massive. It's absolutely massive. I look at the diesel generator sets that are on those sites. I mean, it's billions. So we are just tiny, almost insignificant at this moment in time. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's a book by a guy called Malcolm Gladwell, which is called Tipping Point.
Yes.
And in Tipping Point, they talk about, it's actually just a new one, actually called Revenge of the Tipping Point. And in that, he talks about what proportion do you need to get to before you get proper traction and it moves to it. And he works around the 25 to 30% mark. So theoretically, if we get to that 25 to 30% mark, we should then see the entire sector start incorporating battery storage as just a standard on their sites. Because I look at it now, the amount of money we save people, because I'd love to tell you that they're taking our product on and their green mission and, you know, all of that. That does count. Don't get me wrong, that's a massive part. It is a part of it for our clients, but no, still to this day, what remains is how much is this thing going to save me? And nobody's ever taken on diesel products and said, how much is this going to save me?
Yeah.
Never. But it's the first thing that they ask. So we've got to get our heads around how it is that we move the market to double what we're currently doing. So then in turn, we can triple that before we even, you know, as well as thinking about the other sectors that we can serve.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we talk about tipping points quite a lot. I think especially in marketing, you often see things get steady growth, and it jumps, and then you get steady growth, and then you've always kind of got that next jump. which I think is an interesting point in business, really.
Yeah. And to be honest, that's all I've thought about really. For a long time is, okay, what is it that's gonna make it trigger to the next bit, to the next hurdle, to then again progress to the next hurdle, and yeah, it occupies my every waking moment.
I heard Jeff Bezos talk about something he was talking about with Amazon, and he was saying that when everyone else was thinking about profit, he was thinking about acquiring customers.
Right.
And then because really what he did is he just acquired loads of customers. And once they were using Amazon, they made it so easy for you. He wasn't thinking, I'm spending £10,000 on marketing and making £20,000 back. He was thinking, if he made a loss, but he acquired 10,000 customers, long term, what's that benefit? And that's where, like say, tipping points come in. And that's where, and like what you were saying there, people are asking you, how much am I going to save? They're not asking the diesel generator people that.
No.
It's about changing that kind of perception, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that bit about Bezos, because we've never grown this business on the back of bottom line. So I've never been a cost remover. We've continually, so last year, end of 2023, we put 20 million quid through the books. Brad spent 22.
Yeah.
So we're super profitable. I could make more money, I guess, if I removed cost. But all we've ever focused on is the sales line. It's just getting out there, talking to customers, and just talking about how great the product is. What it is that we've done with the product, how it's progressed, this kind of stuff. And just getting it in front of more people. I've never once talked about bottom line, because if we put the right service in, I've got on my board over there, still operate off a whiteboard, about brand values. I grew up in rough pubs around Rotherham, and after a 7-year sabbatical in the army, I went back to hospitality. I spent years in hospitality and kind of managing bars and then business development management roles. And in hospitality, I used to love it. I loved it at the outset. But in later years, I absolutely loathed it. And the reason I loathed it is because you would think in hospitality, all they talk about is customer service and how you improve customer engagement, and making the places that you run the best places to be. But they didn't. All they ever talked about were labour models, about having the right amount of people on at the right time, which never meant that. It actually meant not having too many people on, because if you didn't take enough money, then
What's the least amount of people I can work with
that's exactly
to
it.
give an adequate service?
Yeah. So if you spoke to anybody in this, and I left that industry in 2008, so 16 years ago now. It feels like yesterday, but I still have good friends in the sector, and they're still talking about exactly the same route now. They don't talk about sales. All they talk about is a fantastic labour model and having the right amount of people on at the right time. I made it one of my brand values, one of my core values when we started this business, that we absolutely wouldn't need to talk about that. We would talk about growing the business in the right way, making the client the centre of everything that we do. Some people would think it's product, but it's not. It's about how can we give the customer the best experience and enhance our reputation. Now, I'm not saying we get it right all the time, because we absolutely don't. Far from it. But I think the reason that we are still around is because we deliver fantastic service. We've grown the infrastructure to in line, if not ahead of, the kind of the products that we're delivering to the market. We've got a lot of engineers all around the country. We've got we've got a lot of technicians, engineers on the shop floor building a great product, but we also have people behind me in this part of the building that are, when people phone in, we can get online and we can sort 90% of the issues that they have over the telephone or by dialing into their product. We've always got enough people to do the job and give and deliver great service. And if we don't, it's entirely our fault. It is. There's no one else to blame for that. It's not because we don't have enough people. It's because we've just not done the job right. So, I'm super proud of that. But when I think about the business, the thing that I'm proudest about is people. Just their development when they start with us and where they are today. I look at John Milner, I just talked about before. He's a guy that had been installing solar. Now he's a lead engineer in here. He's just a completely different animal to what he was. And we've kept on, every time we've recruited, we've kept adding experience, greater knowledge, all that to the package. So I think Tom Cummins, who's recently joined me as my chief operating officer, just brilliant. There's just barely anything in a kind of but yeah, I absolutely get imposter syndrome when I'm sat talking to anybody when he's in the room. So he's just taken production to the next level, and I'm, when Tom leaves in the future, then I'm hoping that the next guy that comes in is even better. Or what would be even better for me is that one of the guys on the shop floor are well placed to be able to take his role and then, again, take it to the next level. So we're constantly improving. We are, and I think that also has been a key factor in our limited success.
But success, though.
But so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody that survived, I mean, as well as I do, you have got to be a complete and utter narcissist to start your own business. To think that I can make this work. I've looked at all the businesses, most of them that have gone bust, but I'm the one. I can start a
They're
business.
all doing it wrong, but I can do it.
Exactly. I can make it work. To start a business that is bringing a product to market is just absolutely ridiculous. I would never recommend it to anyone. But when you get it right, when it does go right for the 5%, it's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So as you are looking to expand, obviously we said we work a lot in the construction industry. What other industries do you think maybe don't know of the product that you think would really benefit from it?
Just about everything, really. I mean, we really do serve building trade only. I mean, we do a bit of telecom stuff. We focused entirely on temporary power. We have nothing that sits on a site permanently. So anywhere where you are using power, whether it be as a UPS, uninterrupted power system, so you're there just in case, or you just want to use it for something called things like peak shaving. So peak shaving's really fashionable at the moment. So essentially what you're doing there is you are looking to take the business that you're serving off of mains power when it's super expensive and put onto another power source, which is less expensive. So if you've got a cheap nighttime tariff and you've got a battery storage system on there, you'd look to charge it on the cheap tariff. And then when your electricity hits peak rates, that's when you bring the battery into play. So we do nothing around that, NHS, MOD is an obvious use for our products. They need power in remote locations. It's inherently difficult to get fuel, diesel, to any location. So let alone the cost of it. So I mean, you name it, we should probably be on it. We should. And at this moment in time, we are massively underserved.
What do you think is the main thing that needs to change in the industry?
Which industry are we talking about? Battery storage? I'm not sure. I mean, battery storage, as an industry, battery storage, I think is just fantastic. I mean, I look at any trip around LinkedIn these days, and there is enormous innovation going off around battery technology. I know Elon Musk has obviously spent billions of dollars developing batteries at his gigawatt factory in Nevada. I've obviously spent time in China because we take our batteries from China. Some of the stuff that they're doing out there is just incredible. Anybody who looks at China and still thinks it's a lower grade product just wants the bumps feeling, really. I mean, it's just an incredible place to be. I mean, if you're around this sector in China at the moment, I mean, it's just constantly moving. It is. Yeah, and the take up just in their own country is just absolutely massive. A lot of innovation that's going off at the moment is entirely based in China. So my supplier, I think something like 90% of his business is still in China. It's still around lead acid, actually.
Right.
So yeah, that's in its infancy. There are new battery types coming on, which will continue to make it cheaper, lighter, smaller. So you look at the innovation that there's been in electric vehicles, and how that's progressed from a Nissan Leaf to the Porsche Taycan and the latest iterations of Tesla, and are the obvious ones, aren't they? It's just staggering. The thing that you've got to think about, I think, with certainly with that uptake in EV, if they're going to get to the targets that they want to be around 2030, I mean, who knows if that will come to fruition or not. As it currently stands, everybody thinks that there's absolutely no chance that you'd be able to sell only electric cars in 2030.
Yeah.
But I think one of the ways that you could absolutely make it work is that certainly around residences where you have the opportunity to be able to place batteries, then batteries the way forward. You take the pressure off the grid in the same way that you do peak shaving. So you charge the batteries at a time when the grid is underloaded.
Yeah, I think my car charges between midnight and 4 a.m. I think then it's like 7 pence per whatever instead of 45.
There you go. So if you did that, at the moment, nobody wants to charge their car at 7 p.m. because it's super expensive and the grid's overloaded as it is. So, but if you had a battery outside your house, you stick it on charging battery, you can charge it anytime you want. So you're taking the pressure off the grid.
Yeah.
So for me, it's an obvious way. So lots of people are looking at putting solar on the roofs, but in actual fact, if you just put a bit of battery storage with it, if you're running an EV, you don't necessarily have to worry about whether you're going to be at what time you're going to charge your car. You can charge it anytime and then recharge your battery at the cheapest time. So I think there's enormous opportunity there.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen some of the pods today. Obviously, I think it's pretty massive.
Yeah.
Is that viable to shrink kind of these types of things down to? Is that a viable solution in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think a typical EV is about 90 kilowatts of storage, isn't it? So, which is a lot of storage. So out there at the moment, I mean, we build something called a 4590, and has exactly the same amount of storage in it that a vehicle does.
Right.
So, yeah, we have it's like everything. There is a way to do it. It's just whether you want to do it.
Yeah.
And of course, the biggest problem with it, just like it is with getting batteries into any sector whatsoever, is upfront cost. So, but in the same way that at this moment in time, if you buy a Tesla, or you buy a Porsche Taycan or whatever it might be, the chances are if you want a 22 kilowatt charging unit to get it charged in any, quickly enough, to put it on the grid, you're going to have a 3-phase supply probably put into your house. Well, that's not free.
Yeah.
It's not. So, you could make a decision between that 3-phase supply off the grid, or you could put in a battery storage unit instead. So, I mean, there are a number of ways of doing it, which far bigger brains than mine will be figuring out at this moment in time. So I mean, it kind of gives you an indication of where the market's got to go, really. There's just enormous opportunity.
How are power saving solutions driving kind of innovation within the sector?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, we're restricted in innovation in terms of our engine is supplied by another business. You know, we have a supplier of batteries. So to some extent, we are always going to be limited by the engine that's been supplied to us. But the way in which it operates, you know, the operating system which my guys put together, and the platforms that they sit on, that's where we've got an opportunity to be really innovative. And that will be entirely led, and rightly so, by what the customer is looking for on site. So, you know, what they're looking for today is not necessarily what they're looking for tomorrow, I can assure you. Our biggest project over the last 3 years, we supplied 100 of the high voltage units to one of the biggest plant tire companies in the world. And the reason they bought it from us initially was to power tower cranes. So fantastic at taking a great big inrush load. The battery will cope with that, and then it'll drop off to a much lower level when so when the tower crane starts up, big load, the battery will cope with it. The system will cope with it, and then when it drops off, it'll just needs a really low load. And the high voltage unit is just perfect for that. But it's not so perfect at other applications. It needs, if you're constantly running it at low load, then we need to alter the parameters of the operating platform. So we've learnt a lot of lessons with that stuff. We have to be really clear now, I think, when we're briefing or we're being briefed by a client exactly what it is that they're looking for. Otherwise, you can catch a real cold. So, so I think the operating platform is the obvious opportunity for us, and then we'll carry on looking for the best engine, the best battery that there is on the market for the client, the safest. In 11 years, we've never had any thermal runaway incident. I've seen stuff on the internet where they're keen to show you batteries on fire, all that stuff. We've never had any of that, none of it. So we've got really strict protocols in place to make sure that we never get to one of those events. So I mean, I think that's how we carry on thinking about the product. How is it that we make it that it can cater to as wide an audience as possible and be as safe as possible?
Who is the ideal client for power saving solutions?
I don't think there is one really. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're powering. I mean, at the moment we're looking at, we build stuff that will power hand tools, the smallest application that we have, right up to the product that we just built, again, the high voltage 150. We can parallel that up to 10 units. Actually, with a new battery, it's infinite, as long as we have a BMS on every 10th unit, or energy management system on every 10th unit. So we've made it in that way so that if you are a purchaser of power, you go and buy a 1 megawatt unit, let's say. If that's sat on the shelf, that's an extraordinarily expensive piece of equipment that you've got sat on the shelf doing nothing, getting you no return on investment. The reason that we've made it modular is that you can separate it then into 150 kilowatt bite-sized chunks, really, so that you may have a job that only needs 150. You wouldn't have put a 1 megawatt unit on it, so you can essentially take an eighth or a tenth and keep adding to it parallel. So that's enormously innovative. So we can cater for almost any market there is. It's whether you want to use it. Yeah, but for me, there's nothing better though than taking someone who's skeptical about it all, and then them using the products and say, Christ, I absolutely get it. Yeah, I've no idea why we've not been using this forever.
So what would you say are the biggest challenges that customers face? So if they're moving from what they're currently doing to try and integrate battery storage, what are the biggest challenges they face, and how does PSS kind of overcome them, I guess.
Yeah, it's upfront cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can, for every battery storage unit you buy, you can probably buy 2 generators. So when you're coming around to CapEx, if you're a purchaser of power, again, plant hire company, whatever it might be, construction company, then you do the arithmetic and think, well, I can power 2 sites or I can power 1. So the upfront cost is high. What we need to do as a business is make sure that those businesses are aware of what the long-term payback is. You know, if you operate the battery storage system in the way that it's intended, then you're gonna get a really quick return on your money. You are, and the customer has all the intrinsic benefits of it, which is saving cash because they've halved their fuel consumption. It's reducing their CO2 and NOx emissions, and it's eradicating noise if you're one of our 48-volt units. And there's a reason we call it a hush pod.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. So the hush pod's your kind of flagship product, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is it called the hush pod? It just gets quiet.
Yeah, it's because it's silent. It's not quiet, it's silent. I mean, it's the same noise whether it's on or it's off. The high voltage stuff, there's a noise attached to that because they're driving it. But by comparison to a diesel generator, it's next to nothing. The 48-volt range is completely silent. So historically, if you're on a construction site and you're operating 24/7, often they're in residential areas or not already. So the amount of complaints that construction companies get about noise from diesel generator noise, certainly in the evening, is just enormous. So putting a hush pod on, battery storage unit, completely gets rid of that complaint. Makes you compliant. You know, noise pollution is massive. Use our product, you don't have it. City centre. Do you want to be sat in the city centre listening to a diesel generator all night? And lots of people are. Or why don't you get the battery storage unit to run it overnight so that it's completely silent, you're still providing power, everybody's happy. There's a number of it. You know, it's you asked before who are our ideal customer. Water business, water companies. All temporary power needs by water companies should have battery storage on it now. One of the things that batteries don't do is leak. You know, you're never ever going to have contamination from a battery into water. Yeah, so if you've got less fuel on that site, massively reducing your risk of contamination. So it's another great reason to use battery storage.
What role do you see the hush pods playing in the transition to net zero? That's obviously a big thing in it. We need to get net zero.
Yeah.
What role do they have to play in that?
Well, when we first started, we used to average about 6 to 8 hours on battery per day out of every 24. So these days, certainly in winter, we average around 12. In the summertime, we average between 14 to 16 hours. So we flipped the narrative in terms of power consumption. What used to be the primary source of power was the generator. What it is now, if you have a hush pod on, is a battery storage unit.
Right.
So what role do we have in terms of reaching net zero targets? Well, I wish I was big enough to influence those overall reaching targets, but the reality is we're not. So, but what we do have a role in is continuing to tell a story about what we do and making people aware of the benefits of using battery storage, which, whether they use us or not, that will have a knock-on effect in terms of, certainly in the construction sector or temporary power sector, around hitting those targets. Because what we're saying is that by 2030, they want to halve the emissions. Well, by definition, I've just said that we average between 12 and 16 hours, depending on what time of year it is. So that means that they've hit the target already if they're putting the hush pod on.
Right, okay. Wow.
Yeah. I can't think of a better reason than that, really, other than pounds and pence prevents it at this moment in time. It's almost like it feels like they're taking a risk. But I could show you across our fleet that it absolutely works. It does. You just got to Just got to run with it. Pardon the pun.
You've recently, from what I hear, you've took on some investment recently.
We have.
What impact is that going to have on the business?
Well, the obvious one, LDC are a fantastic partner. They bring a level of security that we've never had before. And they potentially introduce us to a much wider market. If we only serve their existing client business portfolio. So and I think back to what we were first talking about, where I said I think people are waiting for a business to fall over to see if it works or not. Then all of a sudden you've got back in, like we have with LDC now, then I think it should give lots of businesses, depending on, regardless of your size, comfort in the fact that power saving solutions are going to be around for a long time, and that we've now, we can invest properly into R&D. We can things that we've never been able to do before. We will now be able to do. So they're a fantastic partner. The due diligence process was tough, to say the least. But just a brilliant team that we partnered with in Nicole Wong and David Baines. They really like the business. They do. And some of the, I've got a new chair now in Gary Jacobson. Just got a real affinity for the business. Because I think the best thing about it is it still feels like it's my baby.
Yes.
So it don't feel like it's been taken over by someone else. So it's, we're still, I know it's early days, but we are still running it we're being left to run it in the way that we've always run it. They like what they see. They love the business, as I said before, and they've really bought into what it is that we're trying to achieve. So they see, we've enormous opportunity for us going forward.
So in terms of opportunity, last question really is, what do you think the future looks like? What is the opportunity for the battery energy storage sector as a whole, and then for power saving solutions within that?
Yeah, I mean, I see us being around wherever, and again, at the risk of repeating myself, wherever there is power, I think there's an opportunity for battery to be involved in that. If you consider that the vast majority of the national grid at the moment is backed up by diesel generators, well, battery should be part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether you've got a small business, large business, battery should be a consideration in terms of, the peak shaving stuff that I was talking about, or just guaranteed comfort. The grid's not always there. We do have power cuts. So potentially if the grid goes down, then a battery's got a role to play in making sure that you don't lose power in that business, particularly if it's power critical. So I think the journey for batteries has just begun, and that's been led by the surge in EVs.
Yeah.
So I can't see it doing a U-turn now and us all saying, no, batteries don't work. Batteries absolutely work. Batteries have a role to play. They're in everyone's life. You just look at the stuff that's on your desk. The vast majority of stuff now, the thing that you've got in your pocket is powered by a battery. So if they didn't work, they wouldn't be used in those type of applications either, would they? So it's just that we make them bigger. So what role do we have to play? Well, I'd like to think that we continue to grow in all forms of the word, and just continue to expand our reputation, really, for delivering a fantastic product and great service behind it. And I think, due to the experience that we've gleaned along the way and the fantastic people we've got in the organisation, I think invariably we'll have a voice in that. I do hope that, and I'm fairly confident that LDC will give us a kind of broader voice. There's very little regulation around the industry at the moment, and I think we've got with the experience we've got, I think we've absolutely got a role to play in that, in terms of setting the narrative, in terms of safety, how you use batteries, what application they should be on, and where they should be mandated, if that's the right word. So I think we can absolutely play a part in that, and then the business, it should follow if we're doing all those things right.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.